Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're undertaking a really fascinating exploration into one of the most profound and I think often misunderstood bonds in our lives.
Mhm.
And that's the connection we share with our dogs. We're not talking about, simple pet ownership or just basic obedience classes.
No, no, no.
The source material we've got digs into what it means to enter a true collaborative partnership. This is a deep dive into connection.
That's exactly right. Our primary source for this analysis is Suzanne Clothier's really influential work, Bones Would Rain from the Sky. And right from the start, the title, it's drawn from a Turkish proverb, and it tells you we're on a different philosophical plane here.
Yeah.
There's not a collection of training tips. It's more of a guide to understanding the emotional and I'd say the ethical dynamics of, of interspecies communication.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you, for the listener.
Yeah.
You're looking to move past just technique, right? Past the sort of behavioral recipes.
Right.
And you want to reach that rare, resonant level of connection that the author talks about, the one that makes the soul sing. So our mission today is to really get our heads around this. What does it take to become completely fluent in the language of dog? How do we actually build that bridge?
Well, the central philosophical anchor of the whole book, and really the essence of this deep dive, is captured in that proverb.
If a dog's prayers were answered, bones would rain from the sky.
Exactly. And the author suggests that our real work isn't just, giving the dog the bone. It's not just the reward. It's understanding what the dog is truly praying for.
And what is that?
It's often connection, clarity, a sense of safety. And so the whole discussion really rests on this core idea that what is possible only within a relationship.
Wow. That immediately sets a very high bar. It implies that technical skill or obedience, while it might be useful, it's inherently limited if it's not rooted in a real mutual relationship.
You're shifting from control to cooperation. That's the heart of it. And to really appreciate the depth of this philosophy, I think we have to understand the author's own relentless pursuit of this fluency. This wasn't some academic study for it. It was an innate magnetic pull that started in her earliest years.
Absolutely. The source material really emphasizes that this was an instinctive gravitation toward animals, a drive that existed long before she had any concept of disappointment or anger from human relationships. She saw animals not just as companions, but as her Mount Everest, the ultimate challenge, the highest aspiration for understanding.
It wasn't a passive interest, was it? It quickly became this intense need for total immersion. She didn't just want to interact with animals. She wanted to know their innermost reality.
To see, feel, smell, and hear the world as they did.
Yeah. And this led to a series of, what she called her experiments in being an animal.
Yeah.
Very detailed, very private attempts.
And these experiments give us this unflinchingly honest and, let's be honest, sometimes comical look at just how earnest her quest was. They were usually done in private, especially after her mother's tolerance for her becoming a dog sort of vanished.
Right.
We get that classic story about her trying to be the family dog, which ended with her licking her aunt's knee under the dining room table.
A critical moment of realization, I imagine.
Yeah.
That canine etiquette doesn't always translate perfectly into human social settings.
Probably not.
But the value in those childhood trials wasn't just in the mimicry. It was in the methodical, almost scientific approach she took. She was trying to reverse engineer their entire world.
So let's get into some of the specific techniques she practiced for fluency in dog. It starts with breathing, with her practicing panting.
Exactly. She tried to achieve that rapid, open-mouthed breathing, only to find out that, unlike dogs, it just left her profoundly dizzy and out of breath.
So she's hyperventilating.
She is. And she realized early on there was this critical physiological difference. Dogs have this incredibly efficient mechanism for regulating temperature that prevents them from hyperventilating. And that taught her something important.
What's that?
That simple mimicry has its limits. You need a much deeper physiological understanding.
And then there was eating. She tried lapping water, eating from a bowl, and immediately regretted her lack of a longer, more functional muzzle.
Right. She saw how much more efficient a dog's natural anatomy is for that.
But the gnawing, she says she could truly get behind that. She notes that she still genuinely loves gnawing on bones from a steak or a chop.
And that physical engagement lets her confirm the dog's state of sheer, uncomplicated bliss when they get a treat like that. It's a sensory insight that grounds her later philosophy, that some primal drives are just profoundly simple and satisfying for a dog.
The attempts at silent body language are really fascinating too, because they highlight the big differences in our physical forms. She tried to cock an ear in response to a sound.
And was instantly frustrated by her lack of visible pinning. Those highly mobile ear flaps that dogs use to express such nuanced attention and emotion.
We just don't have them.
We don't. She had to find workarounds. She tried the tail wag with a rolled-up shirt, but said it had a rather dead effect.
I can imagine.
So she developed her own internal system, a refined, subtle tail wag known only to her. And this forced her to understand that canine communication is often defined by these micro-movements that we, as humans, are just biologically ill-equipped to replicate or even notice at first.
She compensated with vocalizations, though, which she apparently mastered. We hear about her perfecting several growls, a snarl, and a snap with an audible click of her teeth.
A noise she recalls rarely failed to alarm those at whom it was directed.
I'll bet. And that hurt dog yelp, realistic enough to stop people in their tracks. This wasn't just playing around, this was early training and expressive power.
She even leveraged her fluency for practical security. She confesses that she was sometimes employed to bark menacingly outside when her parents were out, to deter unwanted visitors. She understood the power of those deep, resonant threat barks.
And this ambition for fluency, it went beyond dogs. When she started riding lessons at 10, she quickly began absorbing the language of horse.
The slow, measured breath exchange in the nostrils as a greeting, the nicker, the whinny, the pinned ears of anger, the alarmed snort.
Yeah, and the source says that even today, when she's startled, she sometimes reverts to this slight, involuntary horse-like shying motion.
Which is a profound testament to how deeply that animal communication settled into her subconscious. It wasn't just learned behavior she could set aside, it became part of her reflexive identity.
So it's clear that for her, language is this holistic thing. It's body, gesture, sound, intention, all of it. Her childhood was just an intensive lab for interpreting and replicating this world.
But she wasn't always successful. We have to remember the famous failure, the Great Bee experiment.
Ah, yes. The failure of literary application. She had read The Yearling, and after recovering from the grief that story causes,
Of course.
she tried to replicate the method Jody and his father used to track honeybees.
The goal was simple. Attract bees with molasses, gently dab flour on their hindquarters to mark them, and then track them visually back to the hive. And for this, her mother, showing just incredible patience, supplied pie pans, flour, and molasses.
And the ultimate finding of the Great Bee experiment.
The Yearling is a work of fiction.
Right.
She reports that the bees objected rather violently to having flour dabbed on their behinds. It was a painful first-hand lesson that instinctive understanding of one species doesn't just automatically translate to every other.
And that real life often violates storybook logic. But that parental tolerance, supplying chicken wire for her chickens, Buster and Dandy, who later ate all the Mother's Day plants, that was essential. She had the freedom to explore the world through an animal lens, which shielded her from a lot of life's early disappointments.
And this brings us to probably the most critical turning point in her early life, the coonhound crisis of faith. As a small child, she held this simple, beautiful belief that all of God's creatures were welcome everywhere.
Including Sunday school?
Including Sunday school. So she convinced a coonhound she met on the way to join her class. And you have to imagine this scene. A small child and a large, musky, black-coated dog entering this quiet, sanitized classroom.
I can just picture the teacher's face.
The moment she spotted the dog, she gasped in unspoken horror. The exchange was brief, but devastating. "What is that dog doing here?" the teacher asked.
And the author, simple and pure, replied, "He's here for Sunday school."
But the teacher, insistent on maintaining the boundaries of her world, just declared, "He does not belong here."
And that was her first crisis of faith. The moment she realized the limits of some people's acceptance of the natural world, the dividing line was drawn by human judgment.
But the statement that truly encapsulated the teacher's limited compassion was the final dismissive remark.
He smells.
He smells. That one word. Simple, brutal, and focused entirely on the dog's natural state. It spoke volumes about the rejection of anything authentic.
And at age 5, she couldn't argue eloquently, so she just had to apologize to the coonhound. She hugged that warm, slightly greasy black coat, the memory of that rich, musky dog scent staying with her forever.
And she returned to Sunday school, as she notes, infinitely older and wiser, having learned that the failure often rests not with the creature, who was simply being a dog, but with the human's inability or unwillingness to accept the world outside their sanitized control.
That experience really set her on her path, didn't it? Despite all the warnings of failure and the pressure to pursue safe careers like art or writing.
Or librarianship.
Right. She followed her passion, and it led her through managing kennels, working with guide dogs, becoming a full-time trainer, all of it guided by the goal of achieving that deeper, uncompromised understanding.
What really stands out is her conclusion that having a consuming passion acted as this powerful buffer against life's blows. It was a reliable, honest source of focus.
As she beautifully puts it, I have a hard time imagining that a stamp collection would have done as well as my animal friends did.
Yeah. This passion wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a philosophical shield.
That drive for profound connection is exactly what you, our listener, are probably seeking. But it often runs directly into the human desire for quick results. We want easy answers.
We want a shortcut to fluency.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the perfect illustration of why shortcuts fail. The woman who was searching for the magic knots.
Yeah.
The author was working with a particularly difficult dog, and after some intense cooperative work, the dog settled beautifully beside her on this thin leather show lead. Now, this lead had several knots tied in it.
Not for any magical purpose.
No, not at all. Just to give her a better, more secure grip. But when she asked for questions, this woman pointed at the lead and sincerely asked, "Where exactly ye tie the knots?"
Oh, wow. She had witnessed this moment of profound relational success and completely missed the dynamic exchange that created it.
Completely. She chose instead to focus on the physical object, the recipe. She believed the technical setup, the location of the knots, was the key ingredient.
And this highlights why recipes, whether it's a leash design or a step-by-step method for aggression, will inevitably fail us in the pursuit of true intimacy. They provide what? Level 1 knowledge, but they can't replace experience.
It's the famous analogy of grandma's pie crust. You can have the exact recipe, the ratio of flour to shortening, the amount of ice water, but that knowledge alone won't get you grandma's legendary pastry.
You have to practice. You have to make as many pie crusts as she did until the dough feels right in your hands.
It's experiential knowledge. You internalize the process until the technique becomes instinct. And once you move past the basics, experience and knowledge become a springboard for cooking as an art. You can improvise.
And relationships are precisely the same. They're living works of art that demand dynamic creation, not just mechanical adherence. You have to craft a unique bridge with your dog.
Right. To structure this journey beyond the recipe, the source material introduces Stephen Sloan's model for understanding relationships. It breaks connection down into 3 essential levels: mechanical, motivational, and spiritual.
And this framework helps diagnose exactly where most relationships get stuck.
And for many people, even people who love their dogs dearly, they never really progress beyond level 2. Let's start with the one most people recognize, even if they've moved beyond it. Level 1, the mechanical or technical.
This is purely about applied stimulus and predictable forced response. It's a mentality that sees the dog as an object to be manipulated.
The governing philosophy here is simple and dispassionate. If the dog won't do X, Y, or Z, you make him.
You just force it.
You force it. The animal is reduced to a living, breathing machine, and problems are solved mechanically, often through physical force or intimidation. The highest achievement is just technical proficiency, a dog who obeys perfectly in the ring.
We've all seen trainers described as having no heart, right? They get amazing compliance, but you can see there's no emotional connection to the dog. The relationship is dispassionate. It's just competent workmanship.
Yeah, it's about achieving the desired output, not a mutual partnership. And that leads to level 2, the motivational or psychological.
Which is a leap forward, because the human shifts from making the dog do something to figuring out how to make the dog want to do something.
Right. They recognize the dog has an internal world of motivation.
And this is where most modern reward-based training lives. It requires curiosity and empathy to understand what motivates your dog play, food, praise, access to things they want. But there's a vital warning here.
A huge warning. And that is that motivation isn't inherently positive. Motivation can be pleasurable, like rewards and play, or it can be profoundly negative.
Pain, fear, deprivation.
Exactly. The sources explicitly mention using tools like shot collars or withholding resources like food or social interaction to increase compliance. Both are forms of motivation.
We need to spend a moment on why level 2, even when it's positive, is still conditional and limited. If your dog earns an obedience title through purely motivational reward systems, doing it for the food or for the toy, they're operating within a conditional framework.
Think of it this way. In a level 2 relationship, the dog's compliance is transactional. If you take away the reward or the motivation, positive or negative, the performance often collapses.
The dog is asking, what's in it for me? Or what punishment will I avoid?
Right, and that conditional framework fails precisely when the dog is faced with something more motivating than your treat, like a squirrel or a strange person or a perceived threat.
So if I have a dog that performs a perfect stay in a quiet training hall for a piece of chicken, but then bolts at the park when a jogger goes by because running is more motivating than the chicken, that's a level 2 failure.
Precisely. The relationship didn't hold up under pressure because the bond itself was conditional. You've achieved success in training, but you haven't necessarily achieved a great relationship. True partnership has to be something that holds when the external motivation is removed.
And that search for an unconditional bond, that leads us to level 3, the spiritual or the dance. This is where the definition of success completely changes. It's a total philosophical shift.
The defining question at level 3 is no longer how do I make you obey or how do I motivate you? It is how do we accomplish this together? This is the dynamic event of quality where the focus shifts entirely from the dog's behavior to the partnership between the two beings.
Which demands a huge internal shift on the human's part. The author talks about advice she got from her mentor that just cuts right to the core of it. Learn to train without ego.
Moving to level 3 requires setting aside that internal need to be right, to be the boss, or to prove that your method is the best one. It requires you to accept the dog as an utterly honest mirror of your own behavior.
So if the dog is failing, level 3 demands that you first look at what you are communicating or what you are failing to understand.
Yes, it's about pursuing the dynamic quality of connection. And this quality isn't some permanent state you achieve. It's a moment-to-moment choice. You choose to create an event of quality in every interaction, whether it's a difficult training session or just pouring water in the bowl.
And that consistent choice is where the dance really begins.
And this is why the relationship is the foundation for everything. If you have a true relationship, a dog might be willing to try something difficult, not because they fear punishment or expect a reward, but because they trust you and believe in the mutual endeavor.
Without that level 3 commitment, the dog is just a highly motivated puppet waiting for the next string to be pulled.
And the ultimate success, then, isn't the perfect score in the obedience ring. It's the quiet trust shown when the dog is under pressure and chooses to look to you, rather than fleeing or fighting. To powerfully illustrate the destructive nature of straying from those level 3 principles and the profound effort it takes to return, we have to turn to the story of Wendy and her dog, Chance.
Wendy was heartbroken after losing her dog Mel, a dog she describes as a gift of grace, who taught her what true partnership felt like. And in her grief, she impulsively adopted Chance.
Chance was a 10-month-old dog who had spent 6 grueling months just completely overwhelmed in a chaotic, sad shelter.
And he was deeply damaged by that experience. When he first got to Wendy's home, the sheer vastness of freedom overwhelmed him. He would just pace and spin in circles.
The only game he knew from his kennel.
Right, until he physically collapsed from exhaustion in a crate.
But despite that trauma, Chance was intelligent and a quick learner at home. But in a public training class, the pressure was just too much.
His behavior became paradoxical. He would either perform well, or he'd surrender completely and just lie down defeated, or, and this is the most terrifying part, he would bolt away in a panicked flight.
So Wendy desperately sought expert advice, which tragically only made the problem worse. She got this bewildering array of conflicting assessments. One trainer focused on his damaged nervous system from the shelter, another just labeled him fearful and submissive.
But the most psychologically damaging assessment came from a third trainer who imposed a human failing onto the dog, claiming his resistance came from a will to displease.
A will to displease. That he was deliberately choosing to be obstinate.
Ugh.
This is the failure of misplaced faith. Wendy loved Chance, but she had been taught to believe that experts knew more than her own heart did. So she ignored her inner feeling of deep unease and tried methods that just felt intuitively harsh and wrong.
That uneasiness turned to absolute horror during an incident involving a young dog and the practice of the ear pinch.
This technique, used in force training to make a dog accept a dumbbell, involves pinching the ear painfully until the dog opens its mouth to relieve the sensation, and then the dumbbell is inserted.
It's awful.
The source material details this terrible scene. The young dog struggled and screamed in protest. The trainer, deciding the dog was just stubborn, instructed the owner to execute a stereo ear. pinching both ears at the same time.
Oh my God.
The dog fought until he went limp, dazed, with eyes filled with unmistakable fear and pain. It was a moment of total surrender achieved through cruelty.
And Wendy watched that sweet dog's spirit break, and in that instant, she had her own crisis of conscience. This is not what you do to a dog you love.
She abandoned that technical level 1 training path forever, realizing that no obedience title was worth sacrificing the dog's trust.
But her crisis with Chance just deepened when she sought help for his dangerous bolting. A level 2 motivational trainer convinced her that an electric shock collar was the only solution.
The only solution to save Chance's life from the dangers of suburbia. They fitted the collar, and during a sit-stay, Wendy called Chance.
And his eyes went blank. That familiar look of panic disassociation that meant he was overwhelmed, and he bolted in frantic loops.
And the trainer hit the button. Chance leaped off the ground, screaming and snarling, desperately trying to bite the source of the sudden inexplicable pain off his neck.
And the trainer, keeping her thumb on the shock button, made that chilling remark.
Well, that should fry his little brain.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Only when Wendy finally moved to physically restrain the frantic dog did the trainer stop the shock. It's an incident that shows a profound disregard for the dog's internal experience.
Wait, that remark, that should fry his little brain, is so chilling. We have to recognize the immense psychological damage that single incident represents. Not just to the dog, but to Wendy's entire sense of trust in her own judgment. She had participated in a moment of pure cruelty.
Exactly. Even if she believed her intentions were good, the aftermath was devastating. The bolting stopped for a bit, but it was replaced by a total unwillingness to stay, even if Wendy was only 6 feet away.
And when she painstakingly rebuilt his confidence, the bolting returned with a vengeance. And now without any of the subtle warning signs she used to rely on.
His internal pleas for help, his frantic behavior, had been met with agonizing pain, administered by the person he loved and trusted most. The relationship was completely shattered.
This is where the author steps in, reframing the whole problem not as a technical failure, but as a complete failure of the relationship.
Right. Chance, being simply a dog, didn't understand Wendy's good intentions or her misplaced faith in experts. He only knew she had ignored his distress signals and allowed him to be hurt.
So the path back had to be level 3. The author insisted that every action Wendy took from that point on must be guided by one simple question.
Does this help or harm the relationship? And if the answer was uncertain, the action was forbidden.
The restoration of trust began with an exercise so simple it sounds almost counterintuitive. Wendy was asked to leave Chance on a leash, say nothing, and just walk parallel to him.
Tossing a treat only when Chance acknowledged her movements in his peripheral vision.
This was revolutionary because it was unexpected, non-demanding communication. Chance was deep in his own internal struggle, his prayers for the leash to break, and suddenly a reward appeared, but without a command. He didn't have to do anything for her.
He just had to notice her. He glanced, got a treat. He stared longer, got a treat. The power was shifted entirely back to Chance.
And then, the turning point. Chance, testing the boundaries, turned away and stared into the distance, waiting for Wendy to command him or tug the leash. But Wendy waited, silent.
And then, deliberately, Chance turned back, looked straight into her eyes, and started wagging his tail. He chose the connection.
That's the moment of dynamic quality, a level 3 choice. He wasn't motivated by fear or an external reward. He chose partnership and mutual engagement.
And the new philosophy allowed Wendy to interpret Chance's resistance not as a will to displease, but as crucial communication.
I don't understand, or this bores me, or I am too overwhelmed right now.
She learned to listen to the messages written in the slightest drop of his tail, or the folding of his whiskers, long before the frantic screams ever began.
Their ultimate success speaks volumes about the power of this repaired relationship. Chance did eventually get his obedience title, but the true watermark of their partnership came at a practice show.
They were performing well, and as Wendy set him for the broad jump, she saw the shock trainer standing outside the ring.
Oh, no.
And Chance saw him too. That man was the living embodiment of his deepest trauma. Chance looked at the jump, then at Wendy, and then with a brief, quiet glance at the trainer, he got up and simply walked out of the ring with Wendy.
He didn't bolt.
He didn't bolt in panic. He made a measured, conscious choice. He looked to his partner, trusted her, and together they chose to leave the threatening environment.
The judge asked her to try again, but Wendy, smiling at her dog, just confirmed. You're right. He is my dog.
They walked out together. And the author concludes that Chance has no need to pray anymore. All his prayers for clarity, safety, and a true partner had been answered. That moment, choosing the partner over the obedience title, is the very definition of level 3 success.
The story of Chance hinges entirely on the dog's profound capacity for communication, which brings us to the core philosophical concepts of the canine language: honesty and immediacy.
A dog's honesty, the sources assert, is absolute and reliably trustworthy. They are ruthlessly, unfailingly, reliably honest.
And this isn't a moral virtue, it's a biological inability to lie or deceive. They don't have ulterior motives.
That distinction is so vital. Human honesty is a noble choice. We often have to overcome an impulse to lie or obscure the truth. Dogs don't have that option. They tell you their immediate truth, springing directly from their current internal state.
The challenge, then, is that we humans frequently discount this absolute honesty because we filter it through our own experiences of deceit and social dishonesty.
We assume that because we are capable of lying, the white lie, the hidden resentment, the dog must be too. We project our own emotional complexities onto their simple, immediate communication.
The Bella anecdote is a perfect illustration of this human filtering problem. Bella was a dog with severe eating problems. She was refusing to eat the expensive homemade food her owner, Beth, was preparing from a reputable recipe.
And Beth interpreted Bella's refusal as rejection, stubbornness, or defiance, a will to displease.
Right. Bella was only eating enough to stay alive, yet she was eager for other things like chicken and oatmeal. Beth was so focused on the recipe and fighting the dog's perceived stubbornness that she missed the clear, honest physiological message.
Bella was communicating a simple truth, a severe food intolerance to the beef and brown rice in the expensive food.
And when Beth finally realized Bella wasn't rejecting her, but the food itself, she switched the diet, and Bella thrived. And this monumental shift in perspective saved Bella's life years later when she dropped a dumbbell during practice.
Instead of getting angry, Beth, now listening to the honest message, rushed her to the vet and discovered a broken, exposed tooth, saving her from infection.
That honesty, the author concludes, is a gift of light on the darker corners of my soul. Because dogs can't lie, they force us to confront the truth about our own behavior, our impatience, our fear, our arrogance.
She learned this firsthand from a biting incident in her youth. She realized she had been arrogant and distrustful, and the dog was just reacting honestly to her poor communication.
Beyond honesty, dogs offer us the gift of immediacy. They live purely in the now. What they feel, they tell you instantly. This is the canine clock in action.
And this is where we run into the major conflict between canine and human timing, the delayed response. Dogs cannot understand delayed human responses or resentments.
Right. If you come home, find a chewed shoe, and punish the dog an hour later, the dog connects your anger to their present behavior. Maybe they're greeting you, maybe they're lying quietly, and the anger is inexplicable and terrifying.
We have to actively quiet our human minds, silence the ego, and respond in real time. If a dog sends us something as wrong message, it demands an answer now. If we wait until later, we fail the fundamental test of communication.
And this instant feedback loop is why the language of dog is so elegant and precise. It relies heavily on congruity and exclamation. It's never just the spoken word, it's the whole package.
Let's talk about congruity. It means all parts of your message, your voice, your body, your spirit, have to align. If you're inconsistent, the dog gets mixed signals, and they will always defer to the nonverbal.
The Dodger anecdote is the perfect illustration of incongruous messaging. Dodger was a young puppy, labeled hyper and aggressive because he enthusiastically grabbed hands and legs. His owner, Jennifer, was verbally scolding him. Off! Sit! Stop that!
But her physical actions, frantic hand-waving, leaning over, pushing, wrestling, were high energy and exciting.
So her body was saying something totally different.
Totally different. Dodger correctly interpreted her nonverbal behavior as a gleeful invitation to play. Her words said no, but her body screamed, "Chase me."
And he wisely listened to the body. He interpreted her frantic, high-energy actions as a fun wrestling match.
This is where explanation, the unspoken context and background information, becomes critical. Dogs listen to the whole picture, the full context of the interaction.
So a practical example for you listening might be the Monday morning rush. You verbally command your dog to stay in a cheerful tone,
while simultaneously holding the leash with white knuckles, leaning forward, and radiating anxiety because you're late for work.
Exactly. The dog isn't listening to the word stay. They're listening to the tension in the leash, the stress hormones coming off your body, the slight forward lean.
They interpret that as something is wrong and we need to move quickly, which overrides the verbal instruction. A trainer's skill relies on achieving total congruity between all these elements.
The successful resolution with Dodger came when the author achieved perfect congruity. She used stillness, a short phrase, and a sharp, dramatic gasp to clearly signal no play.
The still body and the sudden, clear, nonverbal signal, the gasp, were unmistakable boundaries. Dodger immediately dropped back to the floor. He recognized those congruent signals were not an invitation, they were a boundary.
So he learned which specific, precise behaviors resulted in Jennifer completely shutting down the interaction and which earned attention and praise.
It's the dog math. If I do this, this happens. Their precision demands that we be precise and honest in our full communication package. And that precision is tested most thoroughly in our simplest daily ritual, the walk.
If level 3 is defined by the dynamic quality of partnership, the source material argues that the simple act of walking together is the single snapshot moment that encapsulates a relationship.
That's such a powerful idea. The walk isn't just exercise or a bathroom break. It's a dynamic mutual process. The crucial distinction is between walking the dog, a purely mechanical action where the leash is the substitute for attention, and choosing to walk with the dog.
A mutual choice to be together, an active quality of connection.
If proximity automatically equaled connection, then a crowded elevator would be full of fast friends. But we all know physical proximity can often create distance, especially if our attention is elsewhere.
We often teach the dog that they don't really need to pay attention to us because the leash is there as this invisible, reliable anchor.
And this leads directly to the core problem of pulling on the lead. Pulling is the physical manifestation of a profound disturbance in the quality of attention being given and received.
It's an exchange of energy flowing too heavily in one direction. The dog is fixated outward, and the human is fixated on the dog's neck.
And it takes two to pull. The dog has to have something or someone to pull against. By allowing the dog to constantly drag us forward, we are, in effect, practicing the quality of disconnection over and over again.
Reinforcing the idea that the dog's will is primary and that the human is just the counterweight.
And we shouldn't be surprised when, in a moment of crisis or high stress, when we desperately need their attention, the dog is completely out of practice in maintaining a connected focus. The foundation just isn't there because we skipped all the insignificant moments.
This was the exact foundation problem plaguing Kate and her brilliant but highly volatile German Shepherd, Angel. His problem behavior, barking and lunging at other dogs, sometimes escalating to aggression, was traced directly back to allowing him to pull excitedly on the lead.
The initial problem wasn't aggression, it was arousal management. Allowing Angel to pull excitedly during walks automatically escalated his physiological arousal level. With each excited, strained step, his heart rate raced, adrenaline spiked, and his nervous system became primed to explode.
Kate was unwittingly acting as an anchor that facilitated his emotional volatility. She was abdicating her role as a calming leader.
And the technical fix would have been pure level 1, jerking the leash or using force. But the author's goal was level 3, rebuilding connection in the face of intense temptation. This required the famous arousal management training using farm animals, the turkey test.
The environment was specifically chosen for controlled distraction. Chickens, cows, and the self-assured, fearless turkeys were perfect distractions.
They were confident and interested in every new dog, sizing them up quickly. Angel saw the 6 strutting turkeys and stood frozen, primed like a missile ready to launch.
The author tried to call him, but Angel's fixation was too deep, and she realized that using force jerking the leash or yelling would be grossly unfair. It would only teach him that she might inflict pain without warning, destroying the delicate trust they were trying to build.
The philosophical shift here was key. The goal was not forcing incompatible behaviors, like insisting Angel ignore the world entirely.
Right.
That kind of training is philosophically limited and practically insulting.
That quote is so good. I'm married, not blind.
Right. Dogs, just like us, are capable of keeping their eyes fixed on a handler while their ears and nose track the environment. The deepest connection doesn't require blindness, it requires disciplined attention management.
So instead of force, the author used a subtle, gentle technique. She acknowledged Angel's fascination, but used extremely gentle nudges, small shifts in her own body language, or minute leash tension changes to break the fixation cycle.
And the instant Angel shifted his attention back to her, even just a flicker of an eye, she rewarded him profusely.
It was about teaching Angel that cooperation was more rewarding than fixation, and that he could rely on Kate to manage the environment for him.
This practice was repeated in short, frequent bursts, gradually lowering his ambient adrenaline level and building a new habit of choosing connection over chaos.
And the result was a brilliant compromise, the moment that demonstrated true partnership. When the author finally asked Angel to retreat from the turkeys, he was reluctant to leave the darkly feathered hoodlums in charge.
Instead of fighting or bolting, Angel backed up on his hind legs, craning his beautiful neck to keep the birds in clear sight while complying with the request.
He was negotiating. He agreed to come, he honored the command, but he also expressed his deeply felt need to keep monitoring the perceived threat.
And the author accepted this unique cooperation. His ingenuity in complying while expressing his needs. It proved that the relationship, the mutual agreement and respect, was paramount over strict military obedience.
This underscores the main lesson of Level 3. We often resist going back to the beginning to fix foundation issues. We think we can leapfrog the mundane.
We assume that if the problem happens at the dog park, we should only work at the dog park.
But the quality of connection must be built in those seemingly insignificant moments. The casual walk, the quiet moment of feeding, the gentle touch on the head. You can't reserve your full attention only for important times and expect the relationship to hold when the pressure is on.
The dynamic event of quality must be chosen constantly. We have to constantly ask ourselves if we're just fulfilling a mechanical obligation, walking the dog, or if we are consciously choosing to walk with the dog every single day.
This deep dive into the philosophy of relationship, drawn from Suzanne Clothier's work, shows us that connecting with a dog requires radical self-honesty, immediate congruent attention, and the ultimate abandonment of ego. It's a profound journey that moves us from mechanical technique and conditional motivation to true spiritual partnership.
And we return to the fundamental nature of communication itself. We proudly claim that complex verbal language sets us apart, yet when we are most deeply moved by overwhelming grief, profound love, or agonizing pain, words often fail us entirely. In those moments, we revert to the pure, immediate eloquence of animal communication. A hand pressed against a shoulder, a head resting in a lap, a body pressed against a trusted friend.
We fall back to that shared, silent language.
So if true eloquence really resides in pure, immediate gesture, and if the dog is an absolutely honest communicator, we have to ask ourselves, what does the dog's constant, silent body language tell us about the depth of communication we are consistently missing, misunderstanding, or actively ignoring every single day?
That is something to truly mull over on your next walk. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Safe travels.